Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Danielle, and the purpose of these videos is to share encouragement and wisdom from my college years that is rooted in my Christian faith. And today I'm really excited to share a story about a time that I stepped out in faith and how God confirmed that I was in the right place, and just how I learned and grew from that experience. So I'm excited to share this story and hope that it will inspire you in your faith. So, towards the end of my freshman year, I started to think a lot about what I was going to do during the summer, and a lot of my friends had um, planned to do summer internships, and so I felt a little bit of pressure to try to get an internship somewhere. But at the same time, my freshman year had been a year of great spiritual growth for me, and I really felt like God was leading me to do something ministry related. So I ended up putting out a couple feelers. I did apply to an internship or two, and I also decided to apply to a couple summer camps. I'd always enjoyed going to summer camps in high school, so I thought that might be a fun idea for the summer. So I ended up applying to a couple different camps, and one of the camps that I applied to was a camp in Maryland called River Valley Ranch, and this was a camp that I had been to twice in high school. Just for a week with my church, we would always go to a summer camp, and but it had been a while since I had been to River Valley Ranch. I think the last time I had been there was my sophomore year of high school, so it was a little random that I decided to apply to this camp, but had always just remembered really enjoying it, so thought that I would just apply. So I applied for the jobs over Christmas break, and I ended up applying to River Valley Ranch, and I did a phone interview a couple weeks later, and then a couple weeks later I found out that I had gotten the job as a camp counselor for the summer. So as I was kind of thinking about my different options, it just sort of seemed like this summer camp was the best choice for me, and so I ended up accepting the summer camp position. Um, and so with this camp, there were a lot of different programs that you could work for. So I had been hired for the elementary school camp, and so within the elementary school camp, there were four different themes of camps. So there was a paintball camp, there was a horseback riding camp, there was classic camp, which is the one that I had been hired for, which is just sort of like a typical summer camp experience with different games and activities. And then there was also an adventure camp. So while these camps were all together and did most of the things together, some of the camps were more specialized depending on their theme. So it was an overnight camp. So campers would come for 1 week and stay overnight, and then each week we would get a new set of campers. So that's just some background on how the camp operated. When I first accepted the offer, I was really excited about this experience. I had never really done anything like this before in terms of being a camp counselor or working at a camp. So I was excited for it. But as I went through the rest of the semester and the summer was coming closer, I started to become really worried that I'd made the wrong decision to accept this offer to work at this camp. Part of me was thinking maybe I should have done an internship, and another big worry that I had was that I had a youth group at home where I could have gone and served and poured into the younger students, and part of me felt like I was being kind of selfish for just going away to this random camp in Maryland and leaving home. And so, yeah, really kind of struggled for a few weeks with wondering if I made the wrong decision. At one point, I was considering just letting them know that I had made other plans and I wasn't going to work there after all. Um, and so I was really kind of struggling and going back and forth with this decision. So I decided to talk to a couple people about it. And one person that I talked to was my friend Ashley, who had been sort of a mentor to me throughout high school and was somebody whose opinion I valued. And so Ashley and I met up one day for coffee when I was home. And I remember talking to her and having a whole list of reasons why I was no longer going to work at the camp, and why it was better for me to stay home. And I was really expecting Ashley to agree with me, especially because she went to my church. But instead, when I told her, I remember her just being like, I don't know, I think, you would really grow from this experience. And one thing that she said that really kind of stuck with me is just that my youth group doesn't really need me. Like, yes, my people could benefit from me being there, and I would be able to help, but God can use other people to serve in the ministry at church, and that it's not necessarily selfish of me to go somewhere else, and serve somewhere else. So I feel like that was a really important message that I needed to hear, is that while yes, I have connections at home and I could have been of help, it's not like my church at home needed me any more than they needed anybody else. And so that was helpful and also just encouraging. And so when I was leaving to go home from lunch with Ashley, I was sort of like, okay, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and maybe I will just stick it out. And so when I got home, I had an email in my inbox, and it was from the recruiter from River Valley Ranch who had hired me. And in his email, he said, "Hey, Danielle, one of the girls who was going to be working for the adventure camp decided to do something else this summer. And so the spot is open, and I think that you would be a great person for the position." So with the adventure camp, it's really focused on challenging people outside of their comfort zones. So doing adventure activities like the high ropes course and the zip line and the climbing tower. And he also said that as an adventure camp counselor, that I actually would get an increase in pay because I would have to come early for a specific adventure camp training. So when I got this email, I kind of felt like that was a sign that I was supposed to stay at the camp and work at the camp. The fact that I was now getting to change my position to the adventure camp, which is actually what I had originally applied for, and also that I would be getting a pay raise, and just the fact that somebody had decided to drop their position and then a position opened up for me. So yeah, so all those things I kind of felt like were signs that I should just stick it out and work at the camp. So when the school year ended, I had about a month until the start of camp. I actually went on a missions trip for one of those weeks during that time, which was a lot of fun. But when camp came around, it was early June, and I remember my mom dropping me off in Maryland at this camp where I didn't know anyone, and so I was definitely a little bit nervous, but was kind of just like, okay, here we are. So even though I had felt like this was the right place for me to be, I definitely still went through a period of doubt during my first week at training. I was struggling on some of the adventure elements, and also didn't know anyone, and so hadn't really connected with a lot of people yet, and was kind of wondering if I'm really supposed to be here. But at the end of our first week of training, we were joined by the rest of the staff, and so for our second week of training. And so before that second week of training, we had a worship night, an outdoor worship night, where the purpose was just to sort of focus our hearts and our minds on the Lord, and just sort of prepare spiritually for this summer that we were about to embark on. And so before the worship night, I remember one of the staff people came up to me and he was like, "Hey, we're having students read out some Bible verses during this worship night, and would you be willing to stand up and read one of these verses out loud?" And so I was like, "Okay, sure." And so he hands me a slip of paper, and on it is my favorite Bible verse, and a verse that has really just been sort of my life verse, and that is Hebrews 12, 1 to 2. It's two verses, so it's kind of long, but it says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles." And verse 2 says, "And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith." And another translation says, "the author and finisher of our faith." And so when I saw that verse, I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. And so during the worship night, one of the activities that they had us do was to write down a word on a piece of wood. And the camp was alongside a river, and so we were instructed to write down a word of something that was hindering us or holding us back, and then we would all throw the piece of wood into the river, sort of to symbolize us, like the verse says, throwing off everything that hinders. And I felt like fear was that thing for me that God was calling me to get rid of. I feel like God was saying, I want you to let go of the fear that is keeping you from believing that you're in the right place and that you're the right person for the job. And just like the verse says, the sin that so easily entangles, I felt like God was saying, like, if you don't throw these things off, if you don't get rid of this fear, it's going to keep you entangled and it's going to keep you from doing the work that I have called you to do here. And I felt like going through that activity of writing the word fear on a piece of wood and throwing it into the river was a helpful activity, but also just sort of a confirmation, a second confirmation that this is where I was supposed to be. So in case I needed further confirmation that I was in the right place, it turns out that the theme of the summer for the staff was run. And so sort of this idea of tying our camp experience to the analogy of running in a race. And so each week was sort of going to represent a different leg of a race, and that was sort of what was going to keep us motivated and keep us focused as we went through the summer. So first of all, I love analogies, and I especially love analogies to running. Hence why my favorite verse says, "Let us run the race marked out for us." I just really see life as being like a race, and so it's an analogy that makes a lot of sense to me, especially because I like to run myself. Which brings me to why this is so cool, is that before even coming to camp, I had really been trying to work on my running and trying to develop myself as a runner. So each summer at this camp, they have a run at the end of the summer. So they have a 5K, a 10K, and a 15K, and it's sort of a big community event that happens every year at this camp. And when I found out about that, I was like, oh, that might be a good goal for me during the summer to train for one of the races. And so I ended up registering for the 10K, and was planning to run it even before I had gotten to camp, even before I found out what the theme had been. I had registered for this race. So it was just another kind of cool thing that we were going to be focusing on a theme of running, and sort of as I'm doing this metaphoric run, I'm also going to be physically training for a run. So I felt like God just threw that in as an extra bonus. So camp did eventually start. I know I've been talking a lot about all of these events leading up to camp, but the campers did arrive, and I loved working for the adventure camp and really found a lot of fulfillment in pushing and challenging our campers on the different adventure elements throughout the week and just watching them grow in confidence throughout each week and also grow in their faith. I got along really well with my co-counselor, whose name was Sam, and who ended up just being an incredible friend for me, and we're still friends to this day. I did end up running in the 10K at the end of the summer, which was an awesome experience, and I got to do it with all of my coworkers who had at this point become like family, cheering me on. So that was just a really great way to finish the summer, to sort of finish my race. And throughout the summer, I also grew a lot myself, and was challenged physically and mentally and spiritually and emotionally. And that's kind of what I really want to wrap up with, is how this camp impacted me and continues to impact me. Coming back to school the next semester, I mentioned in a previous video, actually ended up being a pretty challenging semester for me. But what really helped me to get through that semester and continues to help me as I go through different challenges is being able to apply a lot of the principles that I learned that summer to my life. First of all, learning to persevere and rely on the Lord for strength. Every week of the summer was exhausting. I was taking care of 18 girls every week and dealing with everything that came with that. And I really had to learn how to work through challenges and keep going even when I felt discouraged or felt exhausted. I've also really learned to embrace and even enjoy challenges. All summer long, my job was to challenge people and push them out of their comfort zone. And in the process, I was often pushed out of my comfort zone, which really helped me to grow. And so as I've continued to go through school, I've continued to embrace and even seek out challenges. I actually got a job here at school at an outdoor adventure course. So I've been able to continue to pursue my passion of challenging people and helping others to step out of their comfort zone. I've also continued to work on my running, and last year I ran in my first half marathon, which was an incredible experience and something that I probably wouldn't have had the courage to do had I not done the race that I did that summer. And I think a final lesson that I learned, and something that I hope I can inspire someone else to do, is just to step out in faith. If you feel like God is calling you to do something, but you don't have all of the details yet, sometimes you just have to take that first step, and God will work out the details as you continue to follow Him and trust Him. He certainly did that for me in this situation, and I also just hope that you can be inspired to embrace challenges and to step out of your comfort zone, because that really is when we grow the most. And I know that my college experience would not be the same if I had not learned these lessons early on, and really made them a part of my life. So thank you for watching. I hope that this video inspires you to step out in your faith, and look out for a new video next Sunday, and I will see you next week.